traveled a long journey. We have fought for peace and reconciliation, for social justice, for all men, women, and children to live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. These are ideals I still believe in, ideals that I still live for. But the time has come to fully hand over my work. Memory is a vital force in the life of people and nations and can help unite divided society.
Nelson Mandela on the ideals he continues to espouse and the hopes we can pursue too. Good afternoon and welcome to this special broadcast brought to you by SABC News. Well, this afternoon we're coming to you live from the University of South Africa's Pretoria campus, and this being the 11th annual Nelson Mandela Lecture. Now, as many of you will, I'm sure, know, this lecture is a dialogue, the premier dialogue, the flagship dialogue program of the Mandela Center of Memory. World leaders, leading thought leaders from across the world, from across our continent, and from our country as well, who come and address some of the country's leading business people, academics, and leaders of civil society as well, to talk to us about some of the most pertinent questions and issues facing the world today. Well, to deliver this year's lecture is Mo Ibrahim, one of the continent's most prolific business person, thought leaders, but also a philanthropist who is spending his money to try and promote good governance, a corruption-free Africa, and all good things of this world. Well, without much ado, let's have a brief look at Mo Ibrahim, the person he is, but also the values that he stands for.
Sudanese-born businessman Dr. Mo Ibrahim is a man known for putting his money where his mouth is. In 2007, the mobile communications entrepreneur established the Ibrahim Prize to recognize excellence in African leadership. The celebrated prize is a whopping $5 million, given over a period of 10 years to African leaders who encourage and sustain democracy and who also step down from office when their term has ended. This amongst a host of other measures.
We want to give the presidents, the great ones, life after office. After office, we want them not to worry about trying to get a job or earn a living, but to focus in serving the public.
The Independent Prize Committee, composed of eminent figures, made Nelson Mandela its honorary laureate of the Mo Ibrahim Prize, and the first head of state to be honored with the prize for achievement in African leadership was the former president of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano. In the 2004 elections, he chose not to run for a third term in office, despite the constitution allowing him to do so.
I didn't come to say goodbye. I came here to tell the people in South Africa that I will have more time now to visit South Africa, to be with the people of South Africa. So I'm not going away, but it's true that I will no longer come here as the President of the Republic of Mozambique.
Not to seek a third presidential term reinforced Mozambique's democratic maturity and demonstrated that institutions and the democratic process were more important than personalities.
The Ibrahim Prize recognizes and celebrates African leaders who have developed their countries, lifted people out of poverty, and paved the way for sustainable and equitable prosperity.
The other people who are awarded or rewarded, like Nobel Prize for Literature, they too get paid. But in this case, we are talking about African countries. It's not every country that is like South Africa, where the president is paid reasonably well, where there are comforts, even post-pension in terms of VIP protection and a pension. Many countries are too poor to provide for their leaders.
Regarded as Britain's most powerful black man, Dr. Ibrahim has been vocal on how the West often deals with some African leaders, particularly Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe.
Is it because the issue here concerns the white British farmers? It became a big issue. Can you be honest? Why Gordon Brown is happy to go to Portugal, shake hand with Bashir, shake hand with anybody in Africa, but not Mugabe? Is he the worst of the worst or what? I don't know. But among Africans, these things become cynical.
Dr. Ibrahim boasts a distinguished academic and business career. After working for several telecommunications companies, he found Celtel, which he eventually sold in 2005 for $3.4 billion. Using these monies, Dr. Ibrahim set up the Mo Ibrahim Foundation to encourage better governance in Africa.
We need to define what is governance, what are the components of good governance, what should we expect our governments to do, what is the basket of goods which governments are responsible for delivering to its citizens, its stakeholders.
The legacy Dr. Mo Ibrahim will surely leave behind has been to recognize and to celebrate exceptional African leaders. Dumiso Mashaba, SABC News.
Well, a brief look there into the life of Mo Ibrahim, businessman and philanthropist who is delivering this year's annual Nelson Mandela Lecture. Well, without wasting any more of your time, we're going to go inside now where the mayor of Tshwane, Mr. Ramakgopa, is doing his welcoming remarks.
The past, in all its significant configurations, remains an inextricable part of our efforts to build a society based on social justice. No doubt, your efforts will see to it that the name of Nelson Mandela, his work and legacy, live through the ages to become a transcendental monument of fairness, egalitarianism, and freedom. The organizers of the 11th annual lecture could not have opted for a more appropriate venue than the University of South Africa to play host to this year's event. After all, as we make our way to the entrance of the Theo van Wyk building, we are warmly greeted by a portrait of the great man reminding us of the significance of education as a driving force behind personal development. In your 140-year legacy, by making it possible for Nelson Mandela and many others to complete their studies through your institution, you have made an immeasurable contribution to the growth and development of our society. We can thus state without fear of contradiction that yours is indeed a long history of shaping futures. In one of his truly edifying formulations, the scientific luminary Albert Einstein enlightened that, I quote, "Only a life lived in the service to others is worth living," close quote. For that reason, our assembly here this afternoon is a true testament to Unisa's devotion to the service of humanity. To our great speaker and presenter of the annual lecture this afternoon, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, a special welcome to you, sir. Director of Ceremonies, we respectfully petition you to accompany us as we celebrate and reflect on the life of Nelson Mandela, a life worth every second of its existence, a life devoted to the service of humanity. We unassumingly call on each and every one of us assembled here to both jointly and severally cogitate on the wisdom bequeathed by this loyal servant of our people and the great humanist of our time. For those of you coming into direct contact with the kindness and generosity of the city of Tshwane for the first time, it will hardly come as a surprise if you wish your stay was indefinite as the universe. Unfortunately, Albert Einstein did not add to his monumental legacy the science of turning back the clock so as to prolong your gratification at the warmth and equanimity of the city. You are most welcome. Enjoy the address. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for that word of welcome, and also for highlighting the significance of this lecture being hosted at Unisa this year. And on that note, could I please ask the Vice Chancellor of Unisa, Professor Makanya, to come through?
Thank you very much, Program Director. The Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, our Executive Mayor in the city of Tshwane, Executive Mayor Josienzo Ramokgopa, our Chancellor, Judge President Ngwepe and Dr. Ngwepe, members of the Unisa Council and management, Mrs. Gracia Machel and all the members of the Mandela family present, our honored guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, donors, members of the trustees of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great privilege and that of the University of South Africa to work in partnership with the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory at the Nelson Mandela Foundation in hosting the 11th Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. It is heartening for us at Unisa to welcome you today, especially this year when we celebrate Unisa's 140 years of shaping futures in this country, in our continent, and the world over. It is even more remarkable for us to welcome you to Unisa to commemorate the life and work of a global leader, a revered anchor for freedom, justice, unity, and social cohesion, and that of our former president is Twalandwe Nelson Mandela. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for us at Unisa, former President Mandela is not only the embodiment of these values, he is also an icon, a living legend, and one of the great alumni and recipient of Unisa's Robben Island Alumnus Award. He is a great inspiration to our students and staff. His life and work continues to propel us to tap into the best values and abilities of our lives. In one of his letters to one of the great 20th century South African women literary scholars, a fellow anti-apartheid activist and close friend, Fatima Meer, former President Mandela reminded her of the imperative for intellectual commitment to knowledge, not only for its own sake, but for societal development, stating, and I quote, "A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. But when you add to that a literate tongue or pen, then you have something very special," unquote. This and his assertion that, quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world," unquote, speak clearly to our purpose at Unisa to provide knowledge, research, and innovations which are attentive to and relevant to the contextual and global exigencies of our times. They also inspire us to become the leading African university in the service of humanity. We at Unisa strongly assert that education is the foundation for individuals and societies to flourish. As we cast ourselves to the future, we should strive for education that enables excellence, that facilitates success, encourages commitment to societal cohesion and socio-economic development as some of the most viable options for development of individuals their societies, and the global world. With these words, I would like to say, ladies and gentlemen, that it is remarkable for us as a university to welcome you once more in the same words that have been presented by our executive mayor, and to say that this lecture is to the life of our Isitholandwe, Dr. Nelson Mandela. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Makanya. And now I'd like to call the chairman of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. As we've all heard that the thoughts and the prayers of the nation are with Utata at this time. And we've heard of the significance of the role that he has played even within this institution. Could I ask you, Professor, to come through and also just touch on some of the key pillars that Dr. Ibrahim is going to touch on when he talks about social cohesion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for him.
Thank you very much, Director of the program. The Honorable Mayor of Tshwane, Hosi Enzu Ramhopa, whom I was happy to discover is also a poet today. Vice Chancellor Makanya, thank you very much for your warm welcome to us this afternoon. The Honorable Deputy President, Mrs. Machel, and fellow trustees of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, who are the Deputy President himself, Mr. Ahmed Kathrada, Mr. Tokyo Sehwale, Dr. Mampila Rampele, Ms. Futi Mtoba, Mr. Chris Liebenbeck, and Mrs. Irene Manel. I welcome you. Also, Mrs. Makanya, and honorable guests, donors, partners, ladies and gentlemen, and all those who are listening among the public and watching in South Africa, across the African continent, and beyond the world, please receive and accept my greetings. On behalf of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, our Board of Trustees and staff of the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory, we welcome you to this auspicious occasion of the 11th Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. This lecture is particularly special as we celebrate Madiba's 95th birthday and note with pride Unisa's 40 years of educational contribution. And also, special is that in 2013, we mark the 20th anniversary of the death of Amy Beale, whose mother, Linda, is in the audience with us today. It is also impossible for us to miss the national spirit of reflection still hanging in the air on the first anniversary of the Marikana tragedy yesterday. And as we look at one another for guidance, we cannot help but recall the wisdom of our founder in circumstances such as these, and to wish him comfort and peace in his hospital bed. The Nelson Mandela Center of Memory delivers the core work of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, a non-profit organization, human rights oriented organization founded by our founder, whose spirit and example is needed today more than ever. The Center delivers to the world an integrated, dynamic, and trusted resource on the legacy of Nelson Mandela and our mandate to promote the vision and work of our founder by convening dialogues and creating platforms for engagement around critical issues to promote social justice and drive positive change. Our country, South Africa, occupies a special place in Africa today and globally as an example of a country that emerged from the intersections of deeply rooted racial, cultural, and political divides. It was through the timely and robust dialogue that contestants were transformed into stakeholders. Dialogue is fundamental to the legacy of Madiba and to South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy. He based his entire life on the principle of dialogue and the art of listening and speaking to others. It is also the art of getting others to listen and to speak to each other. We need to do more of that today in our country, more than ever. Nelson Mandela's legacy has created the opportunity for our nation to achieve a common future. Through its mandate, then, the Center seeks to contribute towards a just society by promoting the vision and work of our founder and convening dialogue around the critical issues facing our society. This lecture continues to be our flagship engagement platform where dialogue provides rich opportunities to engage people from all walks of life on significant and often difficult and intractable human problems. It focuses our lecture this year on building social cohesion. This topic forces one to ask some hard and challenging questions. Are we empowered a fair and inclusive citizenry? Have we realized true gender equality in South Africa and indeed across the continent? With our current rates of unemployment and youth statistics around the lack of education and access to education, can we provide the right opportunities for our youth, for our future? One final question, as stated so aptly by Madiba himself: are we doing all we can to build the country of our dreams? The Nelson Mandela Foundation has, through this annual lecture then, had the privilege of hosting renowned thought leaders and change makers. This illustrious panel of speakers have made accessible to South Africa and to the world a rare opportunity to experience the diverse insights, experience, and valuable life lessons of global icons who have come before us. As Madiba said, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. I now have the honor of introducing you to one such icon, an internationally respected businessman, an academic, a global philanthropist, and a man whom I deeply respect, Dr. Mo Ibrahim.
Brothers and sisters, all honors reserved. I'm really honored to stand here before you to deliver this lecture. And I must confess, I looked up the list of the previous speakers, and I found that they fell mostly in two categories, either presidents or Nobel Prize laureates.
I'm neither. And I wish to congratulate the trustees in opting for a commoner like me to present this lecture. And brothers and sisters, I'm going to try, but please manage your expectations. Building social cohesion is our topic today. And I believe social cohesion is about really holding our society together. It's about building a national identity that transcends ethnic, religious, class, and gender. It is more than just a passport or an ID. It's where we achieve common purpose as citizens, and when we really feel that we have equitable access and participation in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of our country. It's not about entitlement, but about equal opportunities and hope. It's about dialogue, listening and talking the Madiba's way. Nelson Mandela has many personal, extraordinary qualities. But for me, the most important quality he had was his ability to build bridges, to search for and find out that somewhere, at some level, that common ground with the others. And then using this common ground to build on understanding and ultimately solutions. That is Madiba's way. No doubt that great progress has been achieved in this country over the last 20 years. And if we start with rural development, that clearly has been a priority of all the successive governments here. We do publish every year, my foundation, we publish our index of governance, the African Index of Governance. We measure 88 indicators about the performance of each government in all aspects of their activities. South Africa ranked in the year 2000 as number 31 in rural development out of 54 countries in Africa. Last year it was the 22nd. So there have been marked improvement from 31 to 22nd. It's not a fantastic score, but it is a marked improvement. But it also tells us a lot still has to be done about the rural areas. I must say also that overall, South Africa is number 5. It comes 5th in our overall index of governance. So it's a remarkably good score. To be number 5 out of 54 is not bad at all. It's really good. However, the gap between rich and poor people in this country is still remarkable. The Gini coefficient tables, which I admit is not a perfect measure, but is a very important indicator,
places South Africa right at the bottom. This is the least equitable country in the world, in the whole world. You understand that? The least equitable country in the whole world. And it's only legitimate for us to ask, after 20 years of independence, what exactly is going on here? Why is that? That's a real challenge. We think our friends here in South Africa really need to face up to it. I think what we need also is to have a good conversation about our policies, what worked and what did not work. We need to be brave, really, and have that kind of discussion. If we start with the issue of the land, very important issue. This country adopted a policy of willing seller and willing buyer. I think, and you probably agree, it did not work. Isn't it time for people to seek other solutions? Isn't it time to find a solution within the Constitution, a fair and equitable solution to all parties to address that issue? It is a very important issue for our people in rural areas. And the government needs to have the courage and the grit in order to deal with that. Governance is never easy stuff, but it has to be faced, and this is a very important issue. It has not been addressed in the past 20 years. Another sacred cow, maybe, black empowerment. We adopted black empowerment policy here with the objective of bridging the gap between the rich and the poor, who are usually black people. And isn't it time to check what exactly happened with black empowerment? Did it help really bridge the gap between the rich and the poor? And if it did, why are we at the bottom of the gender table? I think we really need to have a conversation here. We really need to have a conversation, at least for the sake of social coherence. Talking about social coherence, we must also talk about young people, about youth. Youth are the largest constituents in our continent, not only in South Africa, in our continent. Half the African population is below 19 years old. Half below 19 years old. This is the largest constituency in Africa. Now, this can be wonderful news, and also it can be a major problem for us. It can be a wonderful news because our demography in South Africa and in Africa in general is the same. Is the inverse of that demography in Europe, in China, and in Japan. These are countries and continents of aging population. There's no more young people in China really, or in Japan, or in Europe. They stopped having babies for some reason. And that raises a very interesting prospect. Can Africa dream of being the future factory of the world instead of China? China is going to have a crunch in 10, 20 years. Not enough workers. Can we do that? What a wonderful prospect for us to have that huge productivity which those young people can bring to really our factories, to our land, to our workplace here. But in order to do that, we need to do two things. The first thing is we need to pay attention to the education, training of that young people, this group of young people. What are we preparing them for? Is our education system matching our business needs? Are we producing the kind of people which the future jobs will require? Are we doing that? I'm not sure. And I was having a conversation an hour ago with the vice chancellor here about the composition of students, and we both agree that how many students? 2% of African students are studying agriculture. 2%. 70% of our people are living off the land, working on the land. 70% of the people. Only 2% is studying agriculture. So we have an issue here of matching our educational and training programs for the job markets. How many business people are involved in the education process? I doubt none. I think none, really. So that's the first issue. The second issue, or the second requirement for us to have that bright future with our young people, is really the African economic integration. It is time for us, Africans, to understand that as 54 countries which refuse to trade with each other, only 11% of our trade is among Africans. We refuse to let our people travel from one country to another. You always need a visa, and I always say, sadly, although I am Sudanese, whenever I travel in Africa, I carry a British passport because I'm welcomed. My colleague here, member of our board, had huge trouble to get a visa to come and join me, Abdullah Jali. He was Under Secretary General of United Nations, board member. Just to get a visa here is a major trouble. But with my British passport, I'm welcomed through your immigration lines. Is that acceptable? And let us take this further. As 54 countries, we are all sub-scale. We are all sub-scale because we have only 14 exchanges, stock markets. Only 6 or 7 of them has any liquidity. How can anybody start a business in a country which hasn't got a liquid stock exchange? Before you invest money, you're looking for the door, you're looking for the exit. How can you do that? We have countries which has famine. We have countries where tomatoes are rotting because we cannot move tomatoes from here to there. There is no scale. If China was 54 different countries in China, and there are 1.4 million, they are much more than us, we are only 1 billion people. Do you think China would have been where it is today? So let us get it clear in our head that for us to move forward, we need to understand the importance of economic integration of Africa. We need the freedom of movement of people, goods, and capital across our borders. That is essential. So I think these are the two prerequisites. Simple, it's not difficult. We need to get done in order really for us to move forward. And we have an amazing future, we are a very rich continent. But what happens if we fail? We have a tsunami of young people coming through. Millions and millions and millions of young Africans coming to jobs every year. Where these jobs will come from? What those guys will do? This is a recipe for a serious upheaval. Millions of people young people without jobs, and more important, without hope, is a major problem. If it happened, lock up your doors and call out the army. That is the bleak future we're going to face. And that is a very serious issue. And I hope all our leaders, not only in South Africa, all across Africa, I wonder if they can, how can they sleep the night knowing that this tsunami of young people coming, which we need to deal with it. Our future depends on how we're going to deal with those young people. That is the mother of all social cohesion issues we're going to face. Allow me a minute to have a drink. I got too excited. Still on young people, given what is happening, given the demography of Africa, this is the majority of African people. Those guys below 19 years old, below 25 years old is over 60% of the population. How much space they have in the public arena? Who is listening to them? Are they invited to the table? The future is theirs. It is the future. They understand that future better than us. And maybe they have better solution for that than us. So where is the role of those young people? Have we had the space for young people to come forward and really join us in this process of thinking? But what needs to be done? That is a challenge I think we need to deal with. Let's go back to numbers. I love numbers. I'm an engineer. I said half the population are below 90 years old. Do you know what is the median age of African presidents? If you just compare the two numbers, you can see how divided we are. Where is the social cohesion here? It's maybe interesting to note that Obama became president when he was 47 years old. 47 years old. Actually, Bill Clinton beat him. He became president when he was 46 years old. So, people in their 40s are being elected to run a country which is not only the greatest superpower, it has a GDP and economy of $15 trillion a year. 15 times the total economy of our Africa, which is about $1 trillion. And those guys at 40 years old are deemed to be able of running the United States of America. Here, we have somebody in a neighbor country at 90 years old about to start a new term. So what is wrong with us? The other day I was thinking, if Obama Sr. decided to take the young Barack Obama back to Kenya, where young Barack Obama would have been today? You may guess, I know he will never be president of Kenya. We cannot talk about social cohesion without talking also about another important segment of our society. Women. Women actually are the pillar of the African economy because, as I said earlier, 70% of our population depend on land, on agriculture. Who do agriculture? Women do agriculture. Men don't do agriculture. Women do agriculture. Women do agriculture, do family, do kids, do schools. Yet, women have never yet been allowed the dignity really they deserve in our society. We have this still male-dominated xenophobia about women, and we have to admit that. We have a problem here in Africa, and we really need to face that head-on. Rape is a terrible crime. Somehow it is widespread in Africa and widespread here in this country. That is not acceptable. So we cannot afford to really lose what is the really vital, productive element of our society, essential for our social coherence. One thing I have to say here is that I really wish to commend the government and the people of South Africa, because I note that you have quite a good number of women in government and parliament at the head of the state companies. You call them barastats here or something like that. Actually, you have a very high percentage of women, higher than any African country, actually higher than any country in the world I know of. And that is a wonderful achievement. So we have this dichotomy, we have this puzzle here. At the top here, we can see great tolerance and acceptance of the role of women, and they're doing amazing jobs, really. But then, at the rest of society, we don't see that respect really reflected. We have a cultural issue, and that is something we need to work on it, because culture is very difficult to change and to tackle. It needs everybody to work really on that issue. Just to mention a figure, Africa in general improved a lot in our index over the last 10 years on gender issues. We moved 37% up. So that's a great achievement over the last 10 years. But we're coming from a very low base, so we should not pat ourselves in the back, not yet, because a lot of work still need to be done. Now, finally, I would like to say that South Africa really matters. It matters, not, of course it matters to you, South Africans, but also it matters for us, Africans. We look up to you. You are the most advanced, economically, industrially advanced country in Africa. We look with admiration at your wonderful struggle for freedom. Look at your founders, founding fathers, the great man Mandela here, and he's our hero. He's an African icon. He's not only yours here, he's our hero. So we do expect a lot from you, actually. And we will not refrain from being critical whenever we see you wavering and misbehaving, because you do matter for us. You are the locomotive. We supposed to pull this region forward economically, socially, and culturally. Frankly, you are not really doing the job. We expect more of you. And we expect a leadership role for Africa. Over the last years, unfortunately, we have a deficit in leadership in Africa. Look around our 54 countries, you will understand exactly what I mean. We have a serious deficit in leadership. And South Africa needs to step up and to really play a better role in working with Africa. And let me say something. Leadership is not about bossing people around. Leadership is not about securing a seat in the Security Council on behalf of Africa, or chairing the African Union. The leadership we're looking for is a true engagement with Africa. We need a coherent voice for Africa. And that coherent voice you can really help formulate. We need a coherent voice in the issues of climate change. We need a coherent voice on the issues of transparency, tax evasion, illicit transfer of funds. A lot of issues very important for us in Africa where we really need your strong voice to be there. And you have a role to play in Africa by understanding Africa, by engaging with Africa. That's what we're looking for. We are waiting. Don't keep us waiting for a long time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Businessman and entrepreneur Mo Ibrahim delivering the 11th annual Nelson Mandela Lecture. Well, just a short bit of impression, we are joined here by Zarina Patel. Zarina, your impressions of Dr. Ibrahim's address?
I think what was most important about the address today was that Dr. Ibrahim said that for social cohesion, we as a society have to feel like we have common purpose. And he actually outlined a lot of challenges that we in South Africa have around that. One of the most shocking things that he said was that even though we have a lot of improvement that we've seen in the last 20 years, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, that we have the greatest disparity between rich and poor. And he questioned why we are continuing with programs like BEE if they are actually working. A lot of what he talked about was raising questions about how do we bring people to a place where we all feel equal, about Madiba's ability to build gaps, to build bridges between the gaps. So talking about like the role of women in society and how we deal with the cultural challenges around that. And another interesting thing that he spoke about was our priorities in terms of education, that only 2% of our country is studying agriculture. 2% of Africans are studying agriculture, while 70% of Africans live off of the land. So I think he raised a lot of questions. The Mandela Lectures are about dialogue. He talked about Madiba's power in using dialogue to listen and to build that social cohesion. So I saw his speech more as a point from which we have to continue. He raised a lot of questions. He highlighted some of our challenges, but I don't think he gave us an answer. I think he left it to us to take it from there.
Well, I was about to ask you whether it was for him to actually give answers. You are right. I mean, this lecture is about encouraging dialogue, but virtually everything that Dr. Ibrahim has raised about South Africa and the challenges facing our nation today, these are not things that we don't know. Then perhaps the question is, are we folding our arms and sitting quietly in a corner and not doing what we're supposed to do about things that are pretty obvious?
You know, all of these Mandela Annual Lecture speakers are really leaders, and I think you can't listen to him and not see the gap in leadership. part of leadership is really looking at where we are and where we've come from and seeing the progress we haven't made. And so, if our leaders are listening today, one of them was up there on the stage, the Deputy President, if the rest of our leaders are watching and listening, I hope that they can take away from that some things have to change. We're making progress, but for 20 years that progress is not good enough. And if we look at the level of unemployment in this country, if we really look at that question of economic disparity, why is our country, this country that is a symbol of so many positive, beautiful things in the world, still the most unequal country in the world? How can we say, we are living up to Madiba's legacy of 20 years later? We have not changed that.
Zarina Patel, thank you very much for talking to us.
So much. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, Zarina Patel, who was a member of the audience, we chose her for no particular reasons. We would have wanted to speak to as many young people especially as possible, but unfortunately, because of time, we cannot speak to anyone else. Well, that's where we're going to leave it. The 11th annual Nelson Mandela Lecture, delivered this year by businessman and philanthropist Mo Ibrahim. From me, Vuya Mvoko, and the rest of the crew, it's a good afternoon.